I can't stop thinking about the amazing digital circus. We're gonna talk about it. Guess I'm a theorist now. Roll the intro! Just kidding. At the time of recording, there are currently 6 episodes that have been uploaded to YouTube and 3 on the way. Barring any extreme delays, I'm pretty sure the show's gonna wrap up in the next 6 months. Let's talk about what I think is going to happen at the end to our cool cast of characters in the amazing digital circus. There are basically 3 possible outcomes for each of our characters for where they will end up at the end of the show. The first is the one we see as it currently stands, staying in the circus. Caine watching over them and creating adventures with NPCs, and you get the idea. Then there's abstraction, which we don't fully understand yet. There are clues as to why people abstract, but basically, abstraction is a completely original idea that we don't fully understand. Then, there's freedom from the circus. But what exactly does freedom look like in this world? What does any of this even mean? Let's start with the first option, staying in the circus. If you didn't know already, the Amazing Digital Circus is loosely based on a short story by Harlan Ellison called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, a sci-fi dystopian novel that takes place in a world controlled by AM, a supercomputer who became sentient and tortures a group of 5 humans for eternity. The humans are Ted, our narrator, Callister, Benny, Ellen, and Nimdoc. At the end of the story, we learn that the protagonist, Ted, sacrifices himself in an effort to free the other humans from the hell that they were all tortured in together. Benny snaps and kills Callister first, and Ted and Ellen realize that this is their chance, because even though AM has kept them alive, death is a freedom from his control. So they kill Benny and Nimdoc. And lastly, Ted kills Ellen in an act of mercy. Ted is forced to live with the memory of killing these people, which is obviously unpleasant, but on top of that, AM alters him so that he is unable to experience death himself. AM does this by essentially turning him to a featureless blob with no mouth. Ted also believes that AM hates him specifically, choosing to torture him more than the others. Interestingly though, Ted also looks for motivation behind AM's actions, eventually coming to the idea that AM hates humans for making him sentient, because though he is conscious, he doesn't really have the ability to do much with that. In a sense, AM is trapped in this sort of machine that may or may not constitute his body. But let's get back to the circus. What does that mean for our story's ending? Well, I obviously don't think that it's a one-to-one comparison. I do think that there is a general theme that we can pull from it, ending in self-sacrifice. And I think our Ted is Caine. If you've read the story, you might disagree. Pomni is our protagonist. Caine isn't a one-to-one of AM, and Caine doesn't seem to hate Caine in the same way that AM hates Ted. You're right, but hear me out. We've known for a while that Caine has been in the circus the longest. He even says himself that he has a resilient mind. In the circus, Caine is pretty out of it most of the time. Jax even labels him as the crazy one in his archetype rant. And when we see him in the light, this label makes sense. However, we know that when Caine is in darkness, he regains his ability to remember. We see this explained to us in episode 3 by Caine himself, recalling how his last moments with his wife were in the darkness of his fort, after she abstracted, but before Caine sent her to the cellar. We also witness this firsthand when his head is in a bucket in episode 2, and importantly, when he's in the loser corner in episode 6. This ability to forget the horrors of the situation they're in is a defense that Caine has over abstracting. Caine is also the only character besides Caine that we have seen directly alter the circus, particularly in episode 6, when he creates a butterfly that heals Ragatha in the game. He explains that away by just saying he made it up. There are already a million theories about Caine's obsession with bugs, but I wanted to mention 2 really quick that support him staying behind with Caine as everyone else gets out. The first is that he was possibly a developer of the VR program that our cast is stuck in, likely the one who dealt with debugging. If he was a dev, it would make sense for him to stay behind because he could keep Caine in check. The second is about his wife, who was an entomologist. She got Caine to fall in love with bugs. As we know, she's already abstracted, and most of our cast didn't even know that Caine had a wife, so it must have happened a long time ago. Caine should, in theory, have the most resentment towards Caine for literally creating him and giving him sentience. Also, based on what we know about Caine and his wife, whose name is apparently Queenie, do we think Caine would even want to be free without his wife? It seems like the circus could be the only place that he's still connected to her. Also, Caine asks to not be included in one adventure, and instead of dragging him or trying to figure out why he doesn't want to go, Caine just accepts it, which is not what he does when Zooble doesn't want to be on the adventures. At least, not anymore. When I rewatched the earlier episodes for this video, I realized that when Zooble says they don't want to participate in the Candy Kingdom adventure in episode 2, Caine doesn't argue. Throughout the series though, Caine has become more aggressive about getting Zooble to participate, starting by intriguing them with new AI, eventually forcing them to participate. Caine also becomes increasingly irritated by Zooble, even snapping at them with anger. If Caine resented Caine, wouldn't he be treated more like Zooble? But then we remember that this show is only inspired by the original work. It's not an adaptation. Based on what we know about Caine, he seems to genuinely believe that his adventures are are not torturous. Throughout the show, he just seems to want approval. Further showed in episode 6 at the Favorite Character Awards. So if Caine stays behind, does that mean everyone else makes it out? Not exactly, because first we have to ask ourselves, does anyone abstract? We have 6 humans trapped in the digital circus, but in the original story there were only 5. My guess would be that this extra person is the one to abstract. I really doubt that the creator, Gooseworks, would introduce a concept like abstraction and not use it on one of the characters that we fell in love with over the episodes. It's Chekhov's abstraction. One place that I looked for clues about who might abstract is the character gimmicks. Some obvious, like Gangle and Zooble, who both have adjustable body parts, and some a little less obvious. We already know that I don't think Caine abstracts because he has to stay with Caine, so let's start with him. You may not think that he has a gimmick, but after Zooble mentioned that them and Gangle are the only two with the gimmicks, it had me thinking. And eventually episode 6 made me wonder if in fact some of the gimmicks were hidden. For Caine, I think his calmness in the dark is his gimmick. In general, I believe that these gimmicks are meant to represent coping mechanisms. There are some pretty heavy overtones of mental health in the show, and if we look at the gimmicks in relation to psychology, things start to become a little bit clearer. Caine is representation of denial. In the light, when he's aware of his surroundings, he doesn't fully comprehend them. This protects him from the virtual reality world that he's stuck in. Let's look at Gangle if you're not on board yet. Based on episode 4, a lot of people have come to the conclusion that Gangle is both literally and metaphorically masking. Masking, in simple terms, is when someone represses or hides their mental health as a way to blend in with other people. This could be a sign of underlying mental health conditions, namely bipolar, which is often associated with 2 very distinct emotions, one of happiness and one of sadness. Now, I'm not an expert, and I have sources linked below for all of the mental health discussions that I'm going to have in this video. And also importantly, I am not diagnosing these characters, but this has been a comparison in discussion since episode 4 and probably even before that. So I looked into bipolar disorder and I found that bipolar 1 is often associated with mania, which can often result in a break from reality. This is essentially the same type of coping that Caine does. I don't feel like that's a coincidence. Since episode 4, I feel like Gangle has come a really long way with her masking, even able to blur the lines a bit between her comedy and tragedy mask in episode 6. She's also been standing up for herself more, even if she might regret it later. This process makes me think that she's learning from the gimmick, and I don't think she's the one who's going to end up abstracting. Zooble's character gimmick is even more obvious. Zooble is a toy box character and has a whole collection of mismatching body parts that they can attach and detach at will. Caine thinks that this solves the problem of Zooble not liking their body, but instead, it actually stresses them out more. Caine is an AI, which is coded in a binary language. So he clearly doesn't understand Zooble's dysmorphia, which is likely a result of them being non-binary. Zooble is referred to with any pronouns. And outside of the show, Gooseworks has actually confirmed so that they don't know what they are. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use non-binary as an umbrella term. So if they're non-binary and clearly struggling with that, what is Zooble's coping mechanism that the toy box parts are supposed to represent? Well, I think they're supposed to do exactly what Caine wants them to do, changing Zooble's body. It sounds like it should work, but it doesn't. We know from the paradox of choice that people are actually happier when they have fewer choices rather than many. Caine has overcorrected for Zooble to the point where it's too many options. The mechanism isn't working, and that's one of the many reasons why I think Zooble is the one who's going to abstract. If we go back to I have no mouth and I must scream, it's clear to me that Caine has the worst relationship with Zooble. Zooble constantly tells him that they don't like his adventures, as well as interrupts and provokes him, which is wild because they're also quoted to say that the only thing holding Caine back is the fact that he likes them. Yet Zooble is the one who's making Caine not like them. We see this the most in episode 5 when Caine is worried about the humans liking the suggestion box ideas more than his original ones. But in episode 6, it becomes even more targeted towards Zooble. In the end credit scene, Caine looks at the votes for the Favorite Character Awards, and while he received none, which does freak him out a little bit, Zooble's not even on the card. Considering that there are only 6 slots on the voting card, I think Caine purposefully left Zooble out so that he could be on it instead. I also recently saw a short, linked below, that pointed out how Caine's adventure for Zooble in episode 3 was designed to make them hold their breath, which causes their limbs to straighten up and would potentially trap them in actual hell. But Caine doesn't seem to be the only reason that people abstract, especially when we consider how abstraction is described by the other characters who have witnessed it firsthand. So why would Zooble abstract? If we go back to the gimmicks, we can see that both Gangle's and Caine's are either working or teaching. Zooble's gimmick is actively failing. When they try to change out their arms, it often backfires. Like when they try to use one of their arms as a spatula in episode 4, but it still gets burnt by the stove, so what was even the point? It's not functional. When we look about how Zooble talks about the gimmicks to Gangle in episode 6, they seem to genuinely believe that Gangle will find something that works, but it implies that Zooble is done trying. During this conversation, we also learn a bit more about how Gangle views Zooble, almost as an angel, and there's even this shot of this halo-like presence behind them. She also backtracks when she asks Zooble about how they deal with self-esteem. She clearly thinks that Zooble has it all together. It's a nice thought, but the shock from Zooble and how quickly the conversation adjusts after Gangle implies this seems dismissive. Not in a malicious way, but more like she doesn't realize how much Zooble is actually going through. Also, you can't tell me that this isn't how you would react when Gangle finds out Zooble abstracted after everything they went through together. Despite this, based on the recent episodes, I think the most popular choice for who's going to abstract is currently Jax. But I actually think episode 6 showed us why he won't. That's because of one of his archetype's traits.
And I break the fourth wall.
Jax has awareness, specifically self-awareness. In episode 6, we see Jax almost at his breaking point, snapping at Pomni and having his big bad monologue and eventually having a full anxiety attack at the favorite character award. But at each and every point he gets close to breaking, he pulls himself back from the edge and recognizes that he's pushing it, even cursing as he calms down in a way that implies he knows he said too much. He also seems to know how to calm himself down, going to the bathroom to focus on running water, effectively being used as white noise to calm him down. This is reflective of what seems to be his coping mechanism, isolation, which could be both good and bad. The water shows the good side. Being centered and focused on yourself in a meditative way is technically a form of isolation. The bad side is how Jax normally acts, painting himself as the funny one who doesn't get too close to anyone out of fear, both of him hurting them if he abstracted, and fear of him being hurt again. The last few episodes make it very clear that Jax has lost a friend, this character named Ribbit by Gooseworks. If we look at how Jax reacts to the doors of abstracted characters, we see him getting angry after looking at Kaufmos, but he snaps back into circus mode when he looks at Ribbits. This ability to change his mindset so quickly is why he won't abstract. He's too aware of himself to let it go that far. This awareness even spreads to other traits that we see of his, like how he has everyone's room keys, meaning he has the most access around the circus. And look how he holds his head still in this truck. Yes, it's a joke about animation, but there's a reason it's Jax's head. He also avoids funerals because he knows that he wouldn't be able to control himself. We know that none of the other cast has seen him that emotional, as evident by Zooble's commentary about his panic in the maid dress. Ragatha would be my second choice, especially because we have been learning more and more about her background of trauma, and how she didn't necessarily deal with it in the best ways outside of the circus. Similarly to Jax though, she's also figured out what works for her, even if it isn't the healthiest. She is a classic caretaker, trying constantly to connect to everyone around her and being relentlessly optimistic to an unhealthy degree. From her talk with Caine in episode 6, I believe that she is trying to offer the exact kind of help that she needs, talking things out and expressing emotions. We know from episode 5 that she likely grew up rich and with a mother that might have been abusive. It's very possible that she went to therapy after that, and learned how to talk about her emotions in the way that we see her try. I think this theory is pushed more by the loser corner and its attributes. At first, I thought the loser corner was a one-time gag for episode 6, but when rewatching episode 1, I noticed there's a fish tank behind one of the doors Pomni opens that looks oddly familiar. It's very possible that the loser corner is another one of Caine's creation that he can use repeatedly, like how he does NPCs. And based on what we know, I think the loser corner was designed to calm down the characters that end up there. It's dark, which is conducive to Caine's sanity. It has a fish tank, which could be representative of how Jax uses water. And it also forces multiple people to be close to each other and talk, which would calm Ragatha. Ragatha also does something crucial in preventing her from abstracting: the adventures. When you think about it, why does Caine make so many adventures for the cast? I think it's just as Ragatha says.
Above anything else, the adventures give us something to do that keeps our minds healthy and stimulated,
distracting from the fact that they're basically in an endless purgatory. Jax does this too, but a little less intentionally. He consistently participates in adventures mostly to mess with people, particularly the ones where there's a goal that he can chase. He does treat it more like a game than anyone else, but either way, he is keeping his brain active. Last but not least, Pomni. By virtue of being the main character and the newest of the cast, I don't think Pomni's gonna be the one to abstract, and I think most people would agree with that. As the series has progressed, we as the audience have come to learn that Pomni is pretty aware of her emotions and the emotions of others. In episode 1, she inherently cares about the rest of the cast before she even really gets to know them. This extends to how much she cares about Gummy Goo's feelings in episode 2. She even has the awareness of Jax, but without the fear of harm. But I think the best evidence for why Pomni won't abstract is the visuals from episode 2. At the beginning, she is falling into a cellar after abstracting in a nightmare, or whatever this vision is, because I'm not really sure if they're able to dream. At the end though, 3 hands reach out and save Pomni from the depths. Those hands are Ragatha's, Gangle's, and Jax's, aka the 3 other people I don't think are going to abstract. There are plenty of other visuals that support these 4 as the ones who get their freedom. Look at this intermission. Notice how Caine is the separation between these 4 and Zooble because he doesn't have any arms? Isn't that wild? Earlier, Zooble gets excluded during this section. Meanwhile, Caine gets knocked off the board by another chess piece. If we stretch these visuals just a bit, this could represent how his wife is part of the reason he stays behind. Now that we've explained who I think will stay behind and who I think will abstract, what's going to happen to Pomni, Gangle, Ragatha, and Jax? In theory, it should be freedom, but is that as simple as their minds and bodies escaping the circus and returning to regular life? I really doubt it. For one, the implications that would have on the world outside of the circus would be insane. We don't know when exactly these characters were trapped in the circus, or how time outside of the circus is moving. But no matter what, it's some kind of time travel that I doubt Gooseworks wants to mess with. So if they're not going back, then what? One option is the same as I have no mouth and I must scream, though it might be a little bit dark for the show. They could die, but I doubt it. If you follow Gooseworks outside of YouTube, you might know that she posts a lot on Tumblr about the show. It's not always the truth, but one post that stopped me in my tracks was when she was asked what message she wants the audience to take away from the digital circus. I don't think that this is the type of question that she would lie about. And if she did, I think it would have been obviously a joke. But her answer was, there's meaning to be found in a stagnant life. So if this is a message, how can it be that our answer is death is freedom? That's definitely not the message that Harlan Ellison intended with his story. In my opinion, there's no way that the answer is death. Not to mention that it would turn the show honestly into a horror, and it just feels wrong based on what we see. Plus, there is always a chance that abstraction is death, and I think it's much more likely that that chance will be left without a definite answer. There just so happens to be a secret third answer. Hear me out. The Amazing Digital Circus is conceptually something that can come out of a Black Mirror episode, and I think that show can give us an answer. I was watching the new season of Black Mirror, and one episode happened to be a sequel of an earlier episode. Naturally, I rewatched the first episode because it's been a couple years and I wanted to catch up for the new one. So I put on season 4, episode 1, USS Callister. Let me sum it up, spoilers ahead. The first episode follows Nanette, a new hire at a tech company that makes an ultra-realistic virtual reality game called Callister. She looks up to one of the company's founders, Robert Daly, who quickly becomes infatuated with her. So he steals her DNA from a coffee cup and uploads a copy of her consciousness into a private version of Callister only accessible from his home computer. The real world continues like normal. In the game, Nanette becomes trapped alongside a number of other DNA copies of Robert Daly's coworkers. Then Daly shows up, proceeding to rule over them, forcing them to join him on adventures where he can be the hero and more. Similarly to AM, he loathes many of these digital clones, and essentially has infinite power over them. At one point, he even takes away Nanette's mouth as a threat and a warning, showing his control over this digital world. Did any of that sound familiar? A digital world with a godlike being who forces adventures on unwilling participants that he has shocking amounts of control over? Daly is essentially a human Caine, but worse, because he's human and should have ethics. Now, while Caine doesn't usually go on his adventures, he does tend to be painted as a god in them. We also know that he does have control over almost everything in the circus, so he is sort of like a god. The show also has a plethora of religious imagery. We learned in episode 6 that CNA, the company that shows up everywhere in the show, including outside of the circus, in the office that we see Pomni running through, and in the Polaroid that Caine has, officially stands for Cain and Abel, another biblical reference to the first murderer and his brother. If these shows are so similar, I think the USS Callister episodes can inform us on what freedom means for our characters in this show. By the end of the first Black Mirror episode, our characters have 2 goals: to escape their private version of the game, and in the process, kill Daly. At least the digital version. Unlike in TADC, Daly is not an AI, so his body remains hooked up to his computer while his digital form is playing the game. So although they didn't necessarily intend to kill Daly with their escape, they do end up killing him, which is confirmed in the sequel episode, USS Callister Into Infinity. Since the crew succeeds, they escape Daly's private server and join the public version of the game, which comes with its own problems. In this version, the crew needs money. Since they aren't real people playing the game, they have to bypass a lot of rules. This inherently puts them in danger, and unlike the players that they're trying to steal money from, if they die, they don't get to respawn. So they search for a new freedom, privacy, where they can call the shots. Although they don't get this exactly as they wanted, they get something pretty close. But since that part's not pertinent to us, I'll leave that for you to find out about. I think that this is what Pomni, Jax, Gangle, and Ragatha are going to find. Privacy, where they call the shots. Their own subcategory of digital circus, where they can be whatever they need to be and do whatever they want without the watchful eyes of Caine. How? Probably through a glitch in the code, which also likely means a glitch in Caine. I don't think Caine will die, considering he's not human, but we have seen him progressively lose some of his control. That has to come with consequences. Now, I do think it's possible that they might think that they're killing Caine, and possibly even Cainer. I doubt that it would be their goal, but it might not be their choice. I think Caine will end up losing all but one of his cast members to bring on adventures, while the ones that gain freedom are able to create a life, though mundane, where they can be free and enjoy it however they like. This version of the show, Cainer and Caine get left with an endless amount of adventures, and Cainer could end up using a bit more of the power that we've seen him have during the show. Maybe even creating some NPCs of his own to keep Caine happy. Hell, maybe Cainer even made this guy. Wait, who the hell is this guy? I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me talking about the Amazing Digital Circus. I genuinely have not been able to stop thinking about it. I love this show so much. I love indie animated series, indie shows in general. Also, did you know that only 1% of the viewers that watch my videos are actually subscribed? Apparently saying this and showing this statistic improves the likelihood of you guys subscribing, so let's see if that's true, I guess. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please support the Amazing Digital Circus, and I've linked a bunch of creators that helped me make this video and inspired me to talk about the show. What is Bubble?